Technics sold millions of these SL-1200 Mk2s, and they became ubiquitous in the 1980s and 1990s as being the turntable of choice for DJs and turntablists around the world. And why are they so popular? Well, there's several good reasons. Functionality, ease of use, easy to service and mod, build quality and durability. Although it is one of the best engineered and built turntables in history, it does have one significant vulnerability that often arises after a few decades of ownership. This issue can affect the SL-1200 Mk2 in such a way as to significantly affect its performance so records don't sound as good as they could. And may I be bold and say that many thousands or perhaps millions of owners of these turntables may not even be aware what they're missing out on. Most anyone who has owned a turntable is familiar with the two primary adjustments that are made when setting up a phono cartridge. They are vertical tracking force and anti-skating, also known as bias. Those settings adjust the amount of vertical downward and lateral force that is applied to the phono stylus so that it performs at its best. However, some of you may not know that there is a third crucial adjustment. Let's talk about the angle of your turntable's tone arm when you're playing records. Ideally, the tone arm should be perfectly parallel to the record surface during playback. Turntables with higher quality tone arms have features like the ability to adjust the height of the tone arm so that the cartridge stylus will travel within the record groove at the optimum angle. This adjustment is called the vertical tracking angle, or VTA. And if the tone arm is set too low or high, the stylus and cartridge will not perform at their best. So let me demonstrate. So if the tone arm is a little high and the cartridge touches down the record kind of an angle like this, you'll hear sibilance in the vocals and high frequencies. Now, if the tone arm is a little lower than it should be, then the cartridge might be something like this, and then you'll lose some of the high frequency clarity and get boosted bass. The Technics SL-1200 Mk2 has an exceedingly clever design for making this adjustment easy. The ring at the base of the tone arm can be rotated to raise and lower the whole mechanism within a 6mm range. You may ask, what about those unfortunate individuals with turntables that are lacking this utility? How do they set the VTA? Well, they must resort to adding and removing shims or spacers between the cartridge and the head shell or at the base of the tone arm to set the correct vertical height. My Lynn Sondek with an iTalk tone arm has this feature, but it requires a small Allen wrench to loosen and tighten it at the correct height. Trust me, it's fiddly and requires way more effort. My Riga Planer 3 did not come with this feature, so I had to purchase a threaded metal insert that the tone arm screws into. It works, but like the Lynn, it's not nearly as user-friendly as the Technics. Hey, I just bought this very clean SL-1200 locally, and I did quickly detect a common issue with this model. The tone arm height adjustment ring has seized, which means the ring cannot be turned to raise and lower the base of the tone arm. And this is a great feature because there is no standard height to phono cartridges. And ideally, you want the tone arm to be parallel to the surface of the record, not tilted up or down. I'm going to remove and dismantle the tone arm to show you the cause of this problem that plagues so many of these units. So obviously, one of the first things you do is remove the platter. And then flip it over on its, and then we remove the various screws here holding in this bottom cover. They come out pretty easily. They'll have little washers attached to them. I think I have to remove the feet. Luckily, these are easy to remove. heavy rubber base. This is right under the base of the tone arm. The RCA cable and the ground wire are secured by this plastic clamp that put a kink in the cables in order to prevent them from a sudden strong tug from ripping them out. So remove the 2 screws and the other 2 holding in this metal plate. But I do know I need to remove this screw, and remove a little washer kind of lock thing off of this to get this piece off next. This is connected to the locking mechanism that goes up top. But first I have to remove a bunch of screws so I can remove this metal cover that was underneath the rubber one I just took off in order to get this off. A lot of screws. And I'm ready to remove this part. This is quite heavy as well. Wow. This is metal, I guess. Once again, I need to carefully pull the power cable through. Before I can proceed, I must remove a tiny little C-clamp from the top of the spindle. It's kind of tricky, and I'm going to use some small pliers and a screwdriver to pry it off, and I got to be careful not to have it fling across the table and lose it. The next thing we need to do is remove the ground wire. It's running along here, and it's screwed in right there. You'll need to unconnect that. I don't think we need to remove that screw. I think we just need to remove these 3 screws here. Once again, they're in tight. Oh, so, yep, there we go. The arm has dropped through. When you have the tone arm free, unscrew the base in order to remove it, and then carefully pull the cables through it. Now I can reveal to you the cause of this very common issue that plagues many SL-1200s. The grease inside the tone arm assembly becomes hardened and sticky, rendering height adjustment impossible. Luckily, there is a solution. This is the ring that wouldn't turn. Now, it's pretty tight. Now it comes out. But I forgot. You got to turn it the opposite way. It's not the usual righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. Once again, hardened dark grease everywhere. So this explains why that thing was seized or frozen. So next step is cleaning all the grease and putting new grease. I'm using WD-40 oil to clean off the old grease from the threads. It works fine, but there are other products on the market that may be a bit better. See how this is. It's not the world's greatest method. As you can see, this black grease is coming right off on this old rag here. There were some kind of hardened parts in there, bits of grease, very hard. And actually, you have to use this small screwdriver to get in there and pry it loose. Still some in there. Be careful, I don't want to damage the threads. After a few treatments with the WD-40 and some elbow grease, it's looking much, much better. Oil everywhere. Now moving on to the other parts that need old sticky grease cleaned off. And in order not to get WD-40 all over the tone arm, I will dab oil onto the threads with a cotton swab. I'm going to put some oil in this little receptacle here. Now I hope this is the right stuff. I got some white lithium grease. I've used it on other things. I think it would work okay on these parts. So I put some on the swab here. I'm going to rub it around on the inside. Spread it evenly along. One thing to remember, if you try to put this back in by turning it right, it's not going to go in. You got to remember to turn it left to the left to get it to go in. Now this part is important. The 0 on the calibration ring must line up with the red indicator on the tone arm so that it's calibrated when you reinstall the arm on the turntable deck. So make sure when you screw that little plate in with the tiny C-clamp that the 0 on the ring and the indicator are lined up. Now this is ready to go back in to the turntable base. All right, I've got the everything back together with the tone arm, wires, screwed everything down, got the ground wire taped down with some duct tape. Hopefully that holds for a few years, I don't know. All right, so that's what that is. This is the speed control slider that goes on the side where you can play with the pitch of the records. What's going on down here. That's in good shape. Doesn't need any cleaning as far as I could tell. Speed is good. And here's the on-off switch, power switch, and to regulate whether or not it's a 33 or 45 RPM. And there's the power cord right there. And this is the pop-up light mechanism. So I got it all back together, amazingly, with no leftover parts. And it's working great with no issues at all, considering this unit is over 40 years old. That's incredible. Now, even though I said at the beginning that the SL-1200 was really popular with DJs for the disco and hip-hop scene back in the day, I would not hesitate to recommend this model to any serious audio enthusiast who plays vinyl records. It's really a gem and a steal for the price that you can pick up one of these for. So, when would you set the VTA? Obviously, when you mount a new cartridge or when swapping out head shells with different cartridges. Also, if you try different thickness mats, you will need to make an adjustment. Yes, and I know that more modern 180 gram pressings are considerably thicker than the older vinyl, so if you play them more often, adjust the VTA accordingly. I find the easiest way to get the tone arm at the correct height is to put a record on the non-spinning platter and lower the stylus onto the outer edge of the record. And using a ruler or tape measure, check the distance between the bottom surface of the tone arm and the turntable deck. First back near the base of the tone arm and then forward near the head shell. Unlock the height adjustment ring with this switch and then adjust it up or down until both ends match up as closely as possible, then lock it again. I have spoken to a number of SL-1200 owners who weren't even aware of this awesome feature. And if you're one of those, I encourage you to check it out, and I also suggest that you make the appropriate adjustments. And if yours is seized up like mine was, just follow my instructions and you'll be good. Besides being a fantastic record playing device, the Technics SL-1200 is relatively easy to service. And I'm certainly not a qualified turntable technician, but I was able to open it up and get stuck in without becoming intimidated or overwhelmed. So you may ask, how did I learn how to do this? Well, watching YouTube videos, of course, and I reckon if I can do this, so can you. If If you've made it this far into the video, you must have enjoyed it at some level. So please hit the like button below, and please consider subscribing if you enjoy this kind of thing. So until next time, thanks a lot, and see you soon.